schemes in education and the new authorities in Kiev. We have a difference because we will have Oleg Petrovets and the deputy of Kyiv City Council, and more factual Viktorina from NGO Svidomi. Oksana Bychkova, expert on education in Svidomi NGO, and mother of children from kindergarten.
Доброго дня ще раз.
Good afternoon again. I'm Victoria Navrotska, and I'm from the NGO Svidomi, Conscient. Last month, our organization conducted a survey among the Kievites up to 35 years old, and the topic was, what is your attitude to corruption? And during this survey, we found out that for Kievites who are under 35 years of age, the most corruptive section is the educational sector. This is no surprise because these are young people who have children who attend kindergartens and schools, and that is why our organization decided to research on this topic in more detail. We talked to the parents, to the specialists in this sphere, to other experts, and we identified the list of corruption schemes in the sphere of education in Kiev, which we believe are very important, and to overcome which the authorities should do something. So I would like to give the floor to the member of Kiev City Council, Oleg Petrovets, who will present these schemes, and he will talk about that in more detail. Please, here's the scheme. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. The situation is very bad with education in Kiev. This is not just according to the survey, and the situation is getting worse, and now the year is ending, and we can summarize somewhat unify, we can just put together all the problems. We are talking about the new authorities of Kiev and what we have found out. First, corruption scheme that we would like to draw your attention to is so-called interviews during enrolling children to schools. In schools, there are so-called examination groups set up which are examining children. They're examining not just the psychological status, but the knowledge of children. The situation is that there are no requirements to that, legislative requirements. There are just the explanation of the ministry, which explains that that's illegal. Oksana will explain the scheme, and then I will continue. The charity contributions is another corruption scheme which is in the sphere of education, and this is no secret that even though the education is free in schools, but parents all the time are contributing money to schools. And such charity contributions and manipulation with them, there are official and non-official charity funds in school. That leads to the fact that the parents do not understand the difference between the official and non-official charity fund, or what they give to a director, to deputy director, which is not into the charity fund. The third corruption scheme which is used is the no public control when appointing the leadership of school. The paradox is that we practically are saying that appointing of directors and dismissal takes place only at the initiative of the district departments of education. The parents' committees have nothing to do to that. The directors are appointed, and then they serve to the Department of Education. They do not serve to parents and children. And that is another problem. And we will show that taking an example, as an example, one educational institution, non-transparency of budgetary funds. The budget which is allocated by the state, neither teachers nor parents, sometimes even the directors do not know about that. The parents raise money for repair of the school, but they don't know that such needs could have been financed by the state budget. Again, this leads to risks because parents, they do not understand all these things and they spend their money. Sometimes the schools just demand that money, and the parents give this money without knowing how the money will be spent. That is also manipulation, and it leads to corruption risks, and this could be qualified as corruption scheme because the leadership of schools is using that. Also, no public control over distribution of textbooks. The situation is also of paradox. There's no methodology of how the textbooks are distributed. The public doesn't know that some specific school can get textbooks for all the students and some other schools may get only 2-3 textbooks per class. There are cases when the textbooks which were purchased for the budgetary money, they were sold in some schools as such that parents have to buy for their children. Abuse during procurement. The Department of Education, and that has been stressed not just by our organization, but the public procurements are made by people who and from people who provide certain goods and services. We believe that this is quite a serious scheme because a lot of budgetary money that is allocated to education go to that procurement, public procurement schemes, repairs of schools. The legislation allows to do the capital workover of the school, the schools and the departments of education can contact some service providers, and that is happening without tenders. There are the prices set between the service provider and the Department of Education without checking the average prices. There's a lot of abuse when it comes to repairs, and also non-existing positions in the schools, so-called dead souls. There are cases when in schools there's some technical personnel, some firemen, who exist only on paper, but in fact they don't work there. Nevertheless, even some schools there are several technical persons. On paper there are 5 of them, but in fact only 2 are working, and the other 3 just give money to the school. And that is just the scheme of getting the budgetary money. This is briefly about the schemes. Now in detail and with figures, Victoria will give an information with figures about this research.
And then as our research shows, and that was the study was done by our researcher, that is SOK NGO European Choice. They run a project which is called "I Gave the Bribe for My Child." And during that study in Kiev, we received the following data. In average, to put two plays into kindergarten, it cost 3,000 to 8,000. Specialist group from 500 to 1,000 hryvnia. A monthly two funds from 50 hryvnia to 200 hryvnia. It's a paradox that in some kindergartens, from parents they take money from 20 to 200 hryvnia for special human attitude to children. It's about those kindergarten groups are very big, because we have a problem that there are not enough of us beds in kindergartens. They have to take a lot of children, and so kindergarten teachers don't have enough time to pay attention to all. As to schools, to place a child in the school, the same. It's from 3,000 to 12,000. That was 12,000. Those are elite schools, and to place into a specialized class from 400 to 1,000 hryvnia. And monthly they collect about 200 hryvnia. The biggest bribe our people informed, interviews informed, $1,000 to place a child into a lyceum, and those money are collected not just to place them, they just collect them as a charity. How that money is spent, how they are accumulated, nobody knows about that. So I'd like to give the floor to our expert Oksana Bychkova, who will give you more details about this, and about interviews, and about charities, and the situation in education. Good afternoon, I'm a mother, a civic activist and a pedagogue, and I studied the issue of interviews, not as the mother who went to the interview, but as a professional. And an interview, it's not just a play of pedagogues, it's just a corruption scheme. I will tell you about that. Look, Ukraine is a constitutional state, and we have certain rights in the constitution, and we have the constitution which says that every child has the right for education, and there is a law on schools which also states that every child has a right to get a free average education. It means that every child in Kiev, for example, every kid, they must be a school where they would study. So it means that these schools, every to school, a school is connected to streets and buildings. And one of the parents, whose child is 6 or 7 years old, should send a kid to the school. And for that, he must go to a school and see an announcement that this school serves to these buildings, but he comes to a school and he doesn't see that. So he needs to call to district education department and or somewhere else to go to internet to find the data. That's already a violation. Then, according to the law, he should write an application, and his child must 100% go to that school. But instead of that, they tell him you have to sign up for interview. I made a study. I visited 30% of schools in Kiev, and in every school they assign me for the interview. For an interview. What is an interview? That is a global violation of our rights. And how did it come up? Look, all the schools in Kiev, they are financed from the budget. They have to satisfy our constitutional right, because all the kids are signed up to certain schools. Then 10, 15, 20 years ago, they decided to have a specialized school. What does it mean? That they choose a school and they create special conditions, and they invite very talented kids and who will learn according to enhanced program. They will learn physics, but the school should be set up not in the cost of a general school, to which a kid is signed up. And so 15, 20 years ago, they set up 1 or 2 specialized schools, and from the Ministry of Education, they decided they allowed them to have to hold interviews, and our pedagogues, the principals, and those who work for education department, they understood that they found a golden thread, and they received a status to learn English, lyceum, gymnasium, or something else. And the district education departments sent recommendations to principals how to hold interviews. That was a sub-law that violated our rights, and in this time, a lot of money was pumped out from parents just to take their kid. When that situation came to that corner, and they understood that this abuse is growing quick. Ministry of Education and Culture in 2015, in February, they issued an instruction in which it says children that come to the first class, schools of the first and third level, and that is the first, that is primary education, that serve in districts where kids live, they cannot be refused to take them to those schools. Specialized schools, only those boarding schools. They have a right for an interview, but they don't have the right even there. They don't have it to check right math or something else, but all general development. I went to all the schools and almost everywhere, and they have those interviews. Almost in 100% of schools, they have those interviews. And maybe I'll finish emotional, but I'll give an example of one interview. Interviews are not, as you understand, they are illegal, they are not efficient, and they are bad. They hurt because they have psychologists who are not educated. They don't know anything about sensation period of kids, so they don't understand the difference in age. And the last interview I went to, kids received a big test, and for 30 minutes was sitting in a special just in the school. We got called, and I received to show those tests, and they say we have right not to show them to you. They tell that's our secret. And to the last month, a child is writing, reading, and they told that knowledge is lower than average, and we cannot receive such a kid. This school is near to the school, and she told, what should we do? They say, come for interview in August, and until August, come to us and pay us, and we'll train your kid, and the kid will pass that interview. And there are lots of these corrupted schemes, and they discredit our rights, and they hurt our kids and our organization. We will now speak to the Ministry of Education, to the Department of Education, for them to set order, and also to people, because we need to know our rights. And we need to react to this issue. Now I would like to invite one of the activists who fight for people to be able to influence on appointment and dismissal of principals. Good afternoon. My name is Tatiana Fechuk. I represent parents of school kindergarten 579 in Poland for several months. So we are working actively on the issue of our principal, so-called his deeds or her deeds. But the case is still there, and this is why. What's the case? Our principal, that believes that municipal kindergarten, that's her private company. So she does everything she wants there. She demands some money from parents to get into that. It costs 2,000 hryvnia to get into that kindergarten. Without that, nobody is taken to that kindergarten. She set up groups with clubs. So there are average groups, and that's where children of those parents who cannot pay. So they pay 100 a month. Those who can pay, they go to groups with clubs, and they pay 600 hryvnia per month. How that money is used, that's a mystery, and nobody can clarify who and where to.
They believe that there's charity contribution, but the charity contribution is mandatory. They demand the parents to pay that. They send letters, SMS messages. They say you don't have money today, but you have to pay this money today. This is the payment which is mandatory. So our director created conditions for discriminating children according to the material status of the parents, which is violation of the criminal code of Ukraine. The children who attend regular groups, they do not receive any education, because if we would teach the program child in these groups as it should be in regular communal kindergartens, it's a good program, then how could we motivate children to go to the groups where they pay? The director tells that this program child is nothing, and if your children study, they will do not study, they will not be able to enter any school. Our child for 3 years was attending the kindergarten, and in the end of the 3rd year we found out that in the kindergarten there are 3 clubs, activity clubs, which are financed from the budget. This has never been informed to the parents, and that is the activity club of English language, drawing and choreography. Only those children who were attending the so-called groups with activity clubs and who were paying 600 hryvnias were attending these clubs. We started writing letters. We addressed the Department of Education. They said that we did inspection, everything's fine. Don't write anywhere else, everything's fine, we will clarify the situation. We were not happy with that. We wrote to the Department of Education. The Department of Education has not sent the official reply, but they informed us that it's not so easy to dismiss the director, there are not enough grounds. The fact that director deprived children of their constitutional right for education and demanded money, that's not enough grounds to dismiss her. We had to write to members of parliament, to the head of district administration, but this issue hasn't been addressed yet. I would like to mention that we will continue fighting with that. And also I would like to draw your attention to another thing. Many of the parents, thanks to the fact that it's all in our society, believe that this is the way it should be. We need to do a lot of explanatory work so that parents understand that this shouldn't be the case. In fact, briefly speaking, that is what we see as main problems in the sphere of education. What could the current authorities do with that? On interviews, the Department of Education can do inspections whether the interviews are done legally or illegally, and provide the information to the public. On the charity contributions, we do not explain to parents, even to parents' committees. This is to be done. Every parent of a child should understand what's the difference between the official charity contribution with all the documents that confirm it from a regular giving money to some director or the deputy director. That also needs to be done. The Department of Education doesn't do that. Talking about dismissing the directors, you need to take into account the public opinion. The Department of Education has to take into account the public opinion of active parents who are getting self-organized, and they have to take their opinion when appointing or dismissing the directors. It's an absurd situation when the parents go to the departments of education and they go to the commission and they talk about these problems. There's the impression that there's nobody that has to control it, and transparency of the money distribution. The parents' committees have to understand that there should be information on what the budgetary money could be spent for, so that the parents understand this is financed from the state budget. But that is the situation in the country is such that there's no money. You need to assist the school via official contributions. Also, the procedure should be transparent. The schools should understand, and the parents also should follow that their children get proper education. Why their school receives fewer textbooks than the neighboring schools? They should understand that purchasing these textbooks is done from the budgetary money, and they should see the realistic picture, so that they do not buy textbooks in the shops of the school, where the shop received these textbooks because they were bought from the budget. Also, the budgetary money, that's one. Then also abuse in procurement. Also, the state financial inspection of Kyiv should strengthen their control over the use of money. The directors of schools have nothing to do with procurements. That is done by departments of education, and they have relations with persons who provide certain services. Special attention should be paid to the educational establishments, because this is the sphere which is the most corrupt in Kiev. Talking about repairs in schools, we are created to interfere into this situation. All this money for repairs are distributed without tenders. That is the problem. We need to interfere into this situation. We need to inform the public how the money is spent for this school, so that parents understand that the assistance comes not just from their pockets but from the state, and also that the state controls the spending of the money. And talking about these dead souls, the Department of Education is serviced by the state treasury. The state treasury gives them money, which then they give to schools, and people have to sign. The dead souls, they sometimes do not even come to school to get money. Someone else signs instead of them. There are cases which were registered by our activists, so it is important to switch to electronic system of paying salaries via banking system. I understand that the situation is difficult, and some heads of the schools have to do that, to just pay more money to working people. But there are those who abuse that system, and it is to be corrected. These are the steps that we made to improve the situation. That is what could be done in the nearest future. We'll see how the authorities react to that, and we will follow these processes. If you have any questions, please ask.
We have time for two short questions. One of those who is called a corrupt person. I'm a principal. I run association of principals of Kyiv, and somebody believes that I manage the organization of corrupt principals. And do I have 5 minutes? I will try to say what the truth and why it's not truth. If we don't have time, And then I have a suggestion to all of you. Anywhere, let's have a meeting. What you do, it's a very useful thing. And I have a lot of books for how to budget the schools and how to prevent abuses in education. They know about me in the department, in the ministry. If you want to do that, I suggest cooperation. Let's sit down, let's drink coffee. I will pay for my coffee. Maybe not for all, I can pay. And I don't know. Well, you have very good proposals, almost in all directions. I have no question. I want to pass the road of half-truth that we heard from you, and to come to the road of truth, which will solve those issues which we have in education. Thank you very much. We have time for one question, and that's it. I have a question about tools. Let's take one proposal to take into consideration the opinion of parents about hiring or dismissing principals. We can discuss it, but what are the legal instruments? Those self-organizing bodies by schools, they have some powers according to legislation. Nevertheless, they can recommend to the education department a concrete person for to run a school, or could advise to dismiss that principal. Appointment and dismissal is done blindly by departments of education, so people don't know about that. They can appoint someone who will be the first time in the school, and nobody knows about that person. That's a paradox, because one will run the school on which parents committee doesn't have influence. There is a regulation on the councils from education institutions, but they normally exist and they don't have powers. In this case, it's we should change legislation to allow people to influence. If this government is interested in this, they take recommendation, taking into consideration parents' advice and to dismiss or hire principals. Thank you. We have to finish our briefing, and our next one will be at 2 o'clock. Thank you.